Hi everybody, welcome to class with Professor Maid. Today we're going to talk about social stratification and social class. Our think, pair, share for today: what is the difference between income and wealth? How does Weber define social class? What's the difference between equality and equity? What's the difference between Marx's analysis of class and Weber's analysis of class? What's the connection between the dominant class and dominant ideologies? What's the difference between class consciousness and false class consciousness? And how do elites maintain social stratification? Take a moment, pause, and try to answer the questions. When we talk about standards of equality, oftentimes we are using the same words, but we're actually not intending them with the same meaning. And so if we look at some of the different contextual definitions of it, it can help us understand the intentions behind and a better understanding when we're having an academic discussion about equality or equal opportunity. So equality or equal opportunity, sometimes called equality of opportunity. This is this idea that everybody has the opportunity to achieve, knowing full well that we're not all running the same race. In other words, people have a huge spectrum of access to resources such as wealth and social capital, and that is going to change your opportunity or completely close doors along the path of life, right? So not everybody really truly has the opportunity to do things or an equal opportunity, because we already start from a hugely varied starting line. When we talk about equality, oftentimes we're talking about we might say equality, and we mean equality is everybody has the theoretical opportunity. If you change that to equality of condition, meaning that we offer access to resources so that everybody has the same conditions to start from, we would be giving some people more and some people less, which we actually do anyways. But we would be looking at what resources somebody has or lack of resources that they have and offering them more. So equality of condition, a good example of this is if, say for example, you have somebody who works with you and they're in a wheelchair, and the file shelves are all the way at the top where they need to access things. And so everybody who is tall enough can reach it and it's fine. And the person in the wheelchair theoretically has the opportunity to reach it, but the conditions are such that it's not plausible for that person to do so. So if you simply moved the files to a lower shelf or put them in a place where not just the taller people could go, but also people who are sitting while they're working could also access it, that's what we mean by equality of condition. So when you offer those additional resources to students in schools so that they have the ability to be successful, the ability to have the opportunity to work for themselves to be successful, that's equality of condition. If we talk about equality of outcomes, that is when you would like everybody to meet, say, like a basic minimum level, and we kind of show a picture of this here, where again, you might be offering some people no additional resource, no additional box, some people one, and some people 2, 3, 4 more additional resources, so that everybody has the same playing field in the outcome of it. In other words, everybody has essentially access to go to college. Some people are going to get less assistance to get there, and some people are going to get more assistance to get there. But everybody is given enough assistance or access to resources. Really, it's not you're giving them things so much or even money, it's more you're giving them the access. You're opening the door, you're showing them how to access those resources, and you're giving them a foundation. You actually might have to teach students in one community focus more on reading, and another community focus more on math, so that all of them are prepared for college. With some students, you may have to do outreach to their homes so that the parents know how to do the actual skill of applying children for college, and in other communities you might not have to. But you want everybody to get to college. That's equality of outcome. And oftentimes what's unfortunate is when we talk about this, like equality of outcome, people might say, well, this is, you know, unfair because I'm not getting what the person to the right of me is getting. They're getting more. Even though I start with more, I deserve to have as much additional access to help as that other person. But when you look at it from a perspective of, you know, you wouldn't say that when you have a blind coworker who needs an additional program on their computer, right? That's a quality of outcome. They're getting something that you're not getting so that you both have the same outcome. You can be functional at your desk. That's not a bias against the person who's sighted. It's just giving people the opportunity or access to resources if they're not sighted. So social stratification, this is the hierarchy of access that we all have to privilege, or the lack of access that we have, that sets us into a certain location on that social ladder. And according to Marx, yes, Pasha, according to Marx, all of where you sit in that ladder is based on the mode of production. That's the way Marx would have said it. See you later, bye. Are you leaving? So the mode of production is the means of production, how we create our wealth or how we make our economy run. According to Weber, however, it's property, power, prestige. And so property means wealth, power is power, and prestige is prestige. That it's a combination of those three things. Kisses, you need kisses in the middle of my video. It's a combination of those three things: the prestige of your job and who you are, the power that you have, the property that you own, the wealth that you have. All of those things combined create where you are on your social ladder. Every single society stratifies their members. So they all have some groups that are dominant and some groups that are subordinate. Can you not burp in my face? Can you not? And we do that based on class, race, sex, sexuality, age, able-bodiedness, all kinds of different ways, right? And so we ourselves have some combination of that, right? You may racially be in the dominant group, and your sex may be the subordinate group, your sexuality may be the dominant group, your age may be the subordinate group. You know, it just goes on and on and on. Now, when we talk about it in the United States today, we're talking about this huge disparity of wealth and the wealth inequality gap that just keeps growing and growing and growing. The top 1%, 0.1%, own more than the bottom 90%. They have more wealth. That top 0.1% owns more than 90%. So it's not just poor people that are losing out. It's also the working class, the middle working class, the upper, the upper middle class, right? All of them are in a more precarious position. The one person that's better off is that very, very top 1-2%. And we know their names, the Koch brothers, people like this, right? Who own and create the wealth and have so much power and control in our society. And that it is creating a condition where we have experienced the biggest wealth gap that we have seen since before the Great Depression. Essentially, there are three different types of class systems or major class systems within a system of stratification. Your society may be a slavery society where the haves are the owners and the have-nots are the slaves. A caste system is a system in which you can have a hierarchy like a class system, but you can't move up or down that hierarchy. It's impossible. You are born into a caste and you die out of that caste. I believe you can go lower with some of them, but you can't go up. And then the class system, based often on capitalism, has the potential of moving up or down. Today, you are much more likely, especially intergenerationally, to move down the social class ladder than up the social class ladder. In other words, even if you have the same job, or especially if you have the same job as your parents, you are not going to be in the same system, class system, as your parents. Would you like to go out? Let's take a break. I think she needs to use the restroom. Okay, so I'm back. Let's talk about social class. So what determines your social class? That depends on who you ask. According to Karl Marx, it's essentially one factor that determines your social class. It is your connection to the means of production. So when you say the connection to the means of production, the mode of production, right? You are either bourgeoisie or proletariat. Either you own wealth and your money makes money for you, or you get paid an hourly wage. You sell your labor hour by hour, day by day, week by week, year by year, over your lifetime. And no matter how much money you make an hour, you are proletariat. Weber, on the other hand, thought it was a bit more complicated than that. What he essentially said was that there's three elements to your social class. It's the three P's. That's how you remember: property, power, prestige. How much wealth do you have? Not how much money do you have or how much do you make. How much wealth, how much capital do you actually have? How much power do you have within society to get others, to influence others to do your will? And how much prestige do you carry, either through your own job, who you are, your family name, your affiliations, who you marry, that kind of thing. All those three things combined create where you would stand in that social ladder. So the analysis. Okay, so I had to take another break because it was Pasha's dinner time and she had to eat immediately. It's like it's past her dinner time. It's 3:13. So let's talk about Karl Marx and the mode of production. He essentially had labels, right, where we say the haves and the have-nots. You know the bourgeoisie, who are the capitalists. You know the proletariat, who are the working class, right? I'm proletariat, right? I make a wage. But there are a few other people. There is what he called the lumpen proletariat and the petty bourgeoisie. So the lumpen proletariat, sometimes called the inconsequential others, these are people he deemed outside of the capitalistic system or outside of the market, the economy market, right? So people who are beggars, people who are mentally ill, people who are homeless and don't participate in the economy. Those types of people he would have considered to be lumpen proletariat. He also considered prostitutes to be lumpen proletariat, but then when he talks about family, he says that women who are prostitutes are essentially the same thing as proletariat because they sell their sex labor hour by hour, day by day, like we do with our physical labor or mental labor. But he deemed them to be lumpen proletariat because in his time in society, they were more, it was a moral issue. So he just put them in a lower strung because of essentially lack of prestige, ironically, right? And then there is the petty bourgeoisie. So the petty bourgeoisie are people in his time he would have considered somebody who had like a very small business, maybe a shoe salesman who makes his own shoes and sells the shoes, and he has a connection to that and he's making the capital off of the labor he does. He's not working hour by hour, but he doesn't have a large conglomerate business. He would be considered petty bourgeoisie. And what Marx believed was that essentially we all pretty much had class consciousness, especially proletariats, that we understood that we should align ourselves with other working class people or people who worked for a living. and that we all were antagonistic against the bourgeoisie and the bourgeoisie against us, meaning we understood that our interests were different than that of the owners of wealth, the owners of capital. And in his time, he's thinking the owner of like a plant, right? Like the Industrial Revolution is when he saw America. And so he's thinking the owners of, you know, these companies, these industrial companies. But today we would think like how Taco Bell, I believe it's Taco Bell and Coca-Cola, right? Yum Yum Corporations owns Taco Bell, Coca-Cola, a couple other different industries, right? And that's all Yum Yum Corporation. We never see these people. They're not somebody standing there and telling us what to do, and it's not even our boss per se. But these are the owners of the capital, of the creators of wealth that drive the economy. That's the bourgeoisie. The petty bourgeoisie is the person who owns the coffee shop on the corner. Even if they make really good money, they would still be considered petty bourgeoisie from this perspective today with the way, the amounts of money we're using. A false class consciousness is when you either don't understand at all that you're proletariat, that you're working class, which is less likely, but it's more likely to be that you align yourself with that of the bourgeoisie or the interests of the petty bourgeoisie, but you're actually proletariat or lumpen proletariat. That you vote in those interests, right? That you, and this tends to be fairly common today because it can be quite confusing for a lot of people to see clearly what is in their interest economically and politically. And not to be confused with the interests of the bourgeoisie, because the way that things are often spoken is from that perspective. The ideology of any given time is the ideology of the ruling class. From Weber's perspective, he thought it was actually a little more complicated because you needed the intersection between your property, your power, and your prestige to give you that perspective of where you stand on that social ladder. And that can go up and down over time based on who you marry, based on your wealth, based on your access to power. So from a more modern perspective, when we say something like class consciousness, that is that you have the ability to have a realistic and accurate awareness of your actual social class, right? Most of the time, people identify as middle class. If you are poor working class, you identify as middle class. If you're wealthy or upper middle class, you probably also identify as middle class. And that's because you tend to see and interact with people who have the same social class as you do. And so you assume that you are kind of the average or the typical, right? But most of us are actually do not have an accurate awareness of really where we stand. And that's a false class consciousness, right? Marx referred to it as the proletariat identifying with the interests of the bourgeoisie. Myself identifying with the interests of the ruling class and voting on their behalf. That would be a false class consciousness. A class consciousness. And he was really a positivist in this. He believed, he had faith in people that they would have an understanding of their social class, and that people who were working class, meaning people who worked for a living, all people who worked for a living, would have a common identity. The proletariat would know that they were proletariat, and they would come together regardless of religion, race, sex, those kinds of things, and that they would be able to form groups that would be able to fight against the power or the interests of the bourgeoisie. So the bourgeoisie are small in number, but have a huge amount of power, right? The proletariat don't have a lot of power individually, but in numbers have huge amounts of power because they have the mass numbers. And so the way in which the proletariat has power, the only way in which the proletariat can really have power is through coming together, through solidarity, right? As a group, they have group power. And Marx believed that the proletariat would have that and would actually use it to revolt against the bourgeoisie, because people would get fed up. Didn't happen, by the way. People got cell phones instead. So from a functionalist perspective, by the way, these pictures you're seeing in the background, I pulled off of Instagram. And so these are pictures that very wealthy children have posted on Instagram. This is of a Molotov cocktail with really expensive champagne. But functionalists argue that people in society are stratified because of merit. In other words, the smarter you are, the more capable you are, the more talented you are, the more rewards you're going to get, because you are going to be the smartest, most talented, most capable person, and therefore you're the person who's most likely to hold power, prestige, authority, wealth, right? So if this view is correct, that society is a meritocracy where it positions rewards based on merit, we should see that the people who are in charge are those who are not just the wealthiest, but also the most intelligent and talented and hardworking of us. A conflict theorist, on the other hand, would say that stratification has nothing to do with merit. And we have in sociology, essentially asserted that meritocracy is a myth. It does not actually occur, not within society the way we think about it from a functionalist perspective. But from a conflict perspective, as elites emerge as a group, they continue to take a larger and larger portion of their resources, and there's no end to that, to how much they actually want to take. They maintain the social stratification, and they are able to disseminate their ideologies and promote ideologies that maintain them in that position. In other words, they maintain a status quo. And they do this through information, misinformation. It's usually both of those, laws, and if all else fails, brute force. So you want to, if you are elite, control the masses through information and misinformation first, because that is that's what works the best, but also what is the least expensive. So it's the most effective and the least expensive to do. And then creating or embedding law and policy in society tends to be very helpful as well. That also helps to sway ideologies. And then if all else fails, like countries who are fascist dictatorships tend to use brute force. But brute force tends to be the most expensive option for control of the proletariat by the bourgeoisie, but it also tends to be the least effective and is the most likely to result in a real revolution within a society. So meritocracy, right, from the conflict perspective, is a myth. It's an ideology that's promoted by the elites to maintain the status quo, meaning keeping the elites on top and the proletariats on the bottom, and maintain that social stratification ladder. So quick review, can you tell me what's the difference between Marx's analysis of class and Weber's analysis of class? And then this is an activity for you guys online, but if you were in class, you would watch that video and then we would have a discussion, which is essentially what we're doing but we're going to be doing on Flipgrid. And this is it for today. So this is your reluctant YouTube professor signing off. Have a great day.